Hello. My name is Marlette, and the last time I saw my parents, I told them to get away from me, every single one of them. Not because I wanted distance, but because I needed it to breathe. The printer buzzed softly in the corner, the only sound in the room. The lights overhead were dim, flickering like they were tired, like they knew what was coming. I stood across the desk from betrayal, arms folded tighter than I realized until I felt the edge of my fingernails cutting into my palm. He was typing something routine, when his screen blinked. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I did. A wire transfer. Coastal Luxury Yachts LLC. My last name. My parents' names. $420,000. I stopped breathing. Not because I was shocked, but because some part of me already knew. I leaned forward slightly. My voice came out too soft to sound like mine. Can you print that? He paused, blinking at me. What? The screen. Just print it. He hesitated. Something in my face must have told him not to argue. The printer groaned to life. The hum filled the silence between us. I stared at the screen. The number didn't change. The words didn't blur. It was real. I picked up the paper still warm. My fingers trembled hard enough to crease the corner. Looking back now, I should have expected it. That transfer.
It's
For Valora? I asked, already knowing. He swallowed.
Yeah.
It looks like they bought her a yacht. It's marked as a family investment. That's generous. Generous, I repeated flatly. Then my eyes drifted. Beneath the yacht payment, a rejection form. My name. My loan application. Denied. Reason. High-risk medical candidate. Not financially viable. I felt like I'd been slapped by something with no hands. Betrayal shifted. I didn't know you applied here, Marlette. I nodded slowly. I did. When I had 23% lung function. I needed $45,000 for the transplant prep. They told me there was nothing left in retirement. Nothing to borrow. Nothing to sell. My voice cracked, but I kept going. And now I find out I lost to a boat. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The air got thicker by the second. I could feel my skin tighten, my body fight to keep standing. I leaned forward and gripped the edge of the desk. The paper crinkled in my hand. I was shaking, not with rage, not yet.
Just.
The kind of cold that comes when your illusions bleed out. That's where it all started. I walked out into the parking lot. Charleston's humidity clung to my arms like a second skin. I could still hear the hum of the printer echoing in my chest. The marina wasn't far. I didn't plan to walk there. My feet just took me. It was muscle memory from another life. One where Sunday brunches ended in strolls near the docks. One where I still existed in the family scrapbook. The water looked quiet, but it always lied. I leaned against the wooden railing and pulled the receipt from my purse. I held it up to the light. Not because I needed to read it again, but because I needed to feel how thin the truth was. One gust of wind, and this entire lie could disappear. That's what I told myself. But it wouldn't. Not anymore. A breeze stirred the edge of the paper. Boats rocked gently against their slips, the sound of rope creaking like something old waking up. I thought I'd cry. I wanted to. But instead, a memory hit me like a punch in the gut. Hospital hallway. Me in a paper gown, skin the color of dishwater. Phone against my ear. My father's voice. We really wish we could help, but we just can't. And then the silence. The silence after a lie always sounds different than the silence after the truth. A car passed behind me. Headlights streaked across the sidewalk. I blinked out of the flashback and looked at the water again. The yachts sat there like monuments. Velvet ropes, champagne decks, pristine white hulls. Valora's was probably among them now. I clutched the receipt. The ink had smudged slightly. My sweat or the air, I didn't know. I haven't been forgotten. I've been erased. My phone buzzed in my bag. I pulled it out. A hospital billing notification blinked on screen. Final notice. Payment required. I didn't open it. I looked down at the paper in my hand. One life, not worth saving. Another, worth sailing. Some debts are financial.
Some are moral.
And tonight, I learned my family paid neither. The walk back to my apartment felt longer than usual, even though it was the same stretch of cracked sidewalk and quiet porches I'd crossed 1,000 times. The night hadn't cooled, and the air clung to my skin like a reminder of everything I didn't want to think about. By the time I closed my front door behind me, my hands were still tight around that slip of paper. I set it on the counter, turned on a single lamp, and tried to breathe. But breathing didn't feel natural anymore. Not after what I'd seen. I pressed my palms against the cool countertop and stared at the silent apartment. The fridge hummed, steady and indifferent. My phone sat face up next to the sink, the screen smudged from where I'd swiped it too many times tonight. Something in me said I needed to hear the truth from an earlier time, before duffel bags, before yacht transfers, before bills stamped final notice. I unlocked the phone. My thumb hovered over a file I'd renamed months ago and then buried beneath photos I never looked at. They said no.mp3. I tapped it. The audio cracked to life. Dad, I just need help. My own voice, thin, exhausted, echoed into the room. I sank onto a chair and closed my eyes. The sound of my father's sigh followed. You know we're on a fixed income, honey. You can't expect that. Then my mother somewhere in the background. Don't make this harder than it already is, Marlette. You need to be strong about this. I gripped the edge of the chair, knuckles tightening. I could almost feel the cold hospital floor under my bare feet again, the drafty corridor pressing against my spine. The recording kept going. I wasn't asking for a miracle, the younger me whispered, voice breaking. Just a chance. A pause. Then my father's voice, calm as a closing door. Maybe it's time to let go. We'll pray for you. The click that ended the call felt louder than it had any right to be. I pressed stop. The apartment fell silent again, but my heart didn't. It thudded unevenly, like it couldn't decide whether to fight or surrender. Looking back now, I should have known that call would follow me forever. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I stood, suddenly restless, and walked toward the fridge. A photo was taped near the handle, Sophia in her blue t-shirt, grinning like the world hadn't touched her yet. I reached for it and peeled it away. The tape fought me for half a second, like it didn't want to let go either. I held the picture up to the lamplight. Her smile was lopsided, the way it always was when she tried too hard to impress me. I ran my thumb along the edge, remembering how she'd sit on my lap in the hospital and tell me it was okay to be scared. She was 7. She shouldn't have had to say those things. They prayed, I whispered into the stillness. But they didn't pay, and somehow that was enough for them. I pressed the photo to my chest for a moment, then lowered it, and it slipped from my hand. It hit the tiles softly and landed face down. I stared at it. I couldn't bring myself to pick it back up. That's where it all started. A breath caught in my throat, and another memory surged. The hallway outside the ICU, me wrapped in a paper gown, chilled to the bone.
My phone on speaker.
My father's steady voice telling me, without hesitation, that my life wasn't worth rearranging theirs for. A nurse passing behind me, offering a look I'd seen too many times. The look people give you when they know your world is collapsing and there's nothing they can do about it. The past and present collided in the middle of that kitchen floor. I stepped away from the fallen picture and leaned against the counter. I unlocked my phone again, scrolling to my sent email folder. Final request, urgent surgery fund. Opened.
Read.
Ignored. I clicked it. The words sat there on the screen, frozen in time. I'm scared. I don't know how much longer I can wait. I remembered writing that at 3 in the morning, my body aching, the beeping monitors drilling into my skull. I'd stared at the screen for 20 minutes before hitting send. I thought honesty would move them. I thought fear might reach them. But the only thing they reached for that month was a Yacht catalog. They opened it, I said under my breath. They read it. They closed it. And they went back to planning paint colors for the boat. My voice trembled. I didn't. I walked down the hallway to the bathroom. The mirror caught me before I was ready. My reflection looked older than I remembered. Eyes tired, shoulders curved as though I'd spent years protecting something fragile inside me. I brushed my fingers against the scar above my collarbone. The skin there felt different, tighter, like a reminder carved into me by hands that had tried to save me when my own family wouldn't. I traced the line again, not to soothe it, but to remember. I lived, I whispered. That was my mistake. I exhaled slowly. Then my phone buzzed on the bathroom counter. I glanced down. A new text. Valora. Family dinner Sunday. Everyone's coming. You should too. It would mean a lot to Mom and Dad. I stared at the message, the words blurring into one another. The audacity.
The ease.
The assumption that I would show up and pretend like nothing was fractured. I backed out of the text and returned to the audio file. My thumb hovered over it before I clicked save. Then rename. Family dinner.wave. I shouldn't have felt calm, but I did. A strange, steady quiet settled inside my chest, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm finally understands its own direction. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. The next evening came with the same heavy air, the kind that settles low over the water and clings to everything it touches. I left my apartment without thinking too much about why. My phone was still warm in my pocket from the file I renamed Family Dinner Wave, but I wasn't walking toward my parents' house. My feet carried me somewhere else. Somewhere louder. Somewhere that might answer questions I wasn't ready to ask out loud. A neighbor had mentioned Valora's yacht event, some kind of celebration for another brand partnership she'd landed. She's doing so well, the woman had said. Your folks must be proud of her. The way people say those things, expecting me to smile and nod like a minor character in my own family. I didn't plan on going, but somehow I found myself turning toward the marina again. Maybe I wanted to see the kind of life $420,000 could buy. Maybe I needed to understand the scale of what I'd been traded for. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. The dock buzzed with noise, music, laughter, the clink of glasses. Lanterns glowed along the walkway, casting yellow pools of light across the planks. I approached slowly, blending into the crowd of people in linen and soft pastels. For a second, I wondered if anyone would ask why I was there. No one did. Of course they didn't. At the entrance stood a 5-foot canvas photo, Valora front and center, flawless as always, with our parents on either side. Her daughter, Zaire, beamed in a matching dress. Their partners smiled like they'd rehearsed it. Everyone polished, perfect, complete. Everyone except me. I wasn't in the picture. Not in the corner. Not in the back. Not cropped in. Not even cropped out. Their family portrait existed in a world where I had never been born. That was the trip, I murmured under my breath. The week I waited for them to call back. The wind carried my words away. They didn't deserve to linger. A man standing beside me at the entrance, someone I vaguely recognized from the neighborhood, looked at the canvas and smiled. They're a beautiful family. Your sister's something else. Her folks really helped her get all this started. You must be what? A cousin? I felt my lips curve upward, but there was no smile behind it. Something like that. It wasn't worth correcting him. Correcting him meant admitting the truth, that the people in that photo had already decided who belonged and who didn't. I walked past without another word. That's where it all started. The yacht shimmered with spotlights, reflecting off the water in neat, glittering strokes. I stepped onto the deck, greeted by voices discussing renovations, nanny schedules, and planned vacations. Conversations floated around me, full of easy privilege and the false warmth of people who had never needed to choose between paying a bill and keeping themselves alive. I moved quietly, each step deliberate. I wasn't here to mingle. I wasn't here to drink or pretend. I was here to take in the reality I'd been denied, the one my parents had funded with the money that might have saved me. Inside the cabin, I heard a woman telling a friend, they even wrote my daughter a thank you note for bringing flowers to Zair's recital. I swear, her grandparents are the sweetest. My stomach tightened. A thank you note. For flowers. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, scrolled to the one message that had nearly cost me everything. Subject: urgent, treatment needed. Status: read. No reply. No acknowledgement. No concern. Not even a no. My thumb hovered over the screen. I wasn't too much, I whispered to myself. I was inconvenient. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I stepped back outside onto the open deck. The ocean breeze brushed against my shoulders, stirring loose strands of hair against my cheek. Valora stood near the railing, laughing with a pair of brand executives. She looked up and spotted me. Well, look at you, she said with a bright smile, waving like we were close. Didn't think you'd show. I nodded once, just passing through. She didn't notice my tone. She never did. I kept walking, weaving through clusters of guests, each one talking loudly enough to hear themselves over the music. None of them noticed I wasn't part of their world. Not really. I wasn't here to toast. I was here to remember. The wind shifted, and the giant family canvas came back into view through the cabin window. Valora at the center. My parents at her sides. Smiling. Present.
Proud.
Alive in a way they had never been for me. Something inside me clicked into place. I reached for my phone again. Stepped closer. Framed the canvas in the lens. Took a photo. As I walked down the dock, I attached it to a new email, addressed only to myself. Subject: what absence looks like. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. The dock faded behind me as I drove toward my parents' neighborhood the next afternoon, the sky low and gray like it was holding its breath. I hadn't planned a visit. I hadn't planned anything after leaving the yacht. But when I woke up, something inside me insisted I go, insisted I see, with my own eyes, what forgetting really looked like. Not the forgetting that comes from age or distance, but the kind that's deliberate, the kind that's taught. By the time I reached their front door, that strange, quiet-eyed felt the night before was still with me.
It didn't calm me.
It steadied me, like the moment right before a needle pierces skin, sharp, focused, waiting. My mother had told me earlier in the week, "We saved a few things for you in the hall closet," her voice polite but distant, as if I were a neighbor, not a daughter. I stepped inside the house, with that sentence echoing in the back of my mind. The familiar scent hit me first: linen spray, fake magnolia, a pot of something reheated on the stove. Nothing had changed. Nothing except me. Looking back now, I should have known it wouldn't feel like home. I walked toward the closet, my footsteps soft on the old wood floor. Each step slow, heavier than the one before. The closet light flickered when I flipped the switch, illuminating a row of neatly labeled shelves. A drawer was cracked open. I pulled it out. Inside lay a small box wrapped in purple paper.
My handwriting on the tag.
To Zaire. Happy birthday. I froze. The wrap was untouched. No tear, no fingerprint, no sign of a curious child peeling back tape. I lifted it and felt the faint rattle inside. The butterfly pendant I'd chosen 3 years ago. Sophia loved butterflies. I thought maybe her cousin would too. I thought maybe it would bridge something, create something, heal something. She never got it, I whispered. No one even opened it. I didn't feel anger at first. I felt something slower, a kind of ache that spread through my chest like cold water. I held the box carefully, almost reverently, like it was something fragile, even though the fragile thing wasn't the object. It was the intention behind it. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I slipped the gift under my arm and turned to leave, but my foot caught on a paper bag half crushed against the wall. It tipped over, spilling its contents across the floor. Old envelopes, torn cards, and then a folded sheet of crayon paper. My stomach dropped. I knelt down and picked it up with shaking hands. The crease was deep, like someone had pressed it carelessly into the bottom of the bag. The paper smelled faintly of rubbing alcohol and the artificial orange scent they used in the children's wing at the hospital. To Grandma and Grandpa, I love you, from Sophia. Her handwriting. Messy.
Determined.
Hopeful. My breath hitched. I traced the crooked heart she'd drawn beside her name. I remembered that day, the beeping machines, the nurse adjusting her for, the way Sophia looked up at me and asked, "Do you think Grandma will hang it up? Like on the fridge?" I'd forced a smile and kissed the top of her head. If she has a heart, baby. I didn't tell her how unsure I was. And now here it was in a bag of trash, forgotten like a coupon or junk mail. This was all she ever had to offer them, I murmured. And they couldn't even keep that. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I folded the drawing gently, smoothing the wrinkles with my thumb like I could somehow erase the way it had been discarded. I slipped it into my purse next to the unopened gift. The weight of the two items pressed against each other, as if one memory was trying to comfort the other. Footsteps clicked behind me. My mother stood in the doorway, her face pulled into a surprised, almost confused expression. "You're here," she said, as if she hadn't told me to come for my things. "You could have called." I held her gaze. I didn't answer. I didn't trust what might come out. She tried again, voice softer. "Don't dig up the past, Marlette. What good can come of it now?" Her words hit me harder than she knew. All those years of silence, avoidance, and be strong suddenly had a shape, a meaning, a purpose. She hadn't been trying to help me heal. She'd been trying to keep me quiet. What good ever came from burying it? I finally said. She blinked but didn't respond. I stepped past her, heading for the door. My fingers brushed the console table, and that's when I saw another framed family photo. Newer. The same glossy smiles as the canvas from the yacht. My parents. Valora.
Zaire.
The partners. Sophia wasn't in the caption. Neither was I. It was like the house itself confirmed what I'd begun to understand. Forgetting was never the sin. Erasure was. "You don't forget a child," I said quietly, though I didn't mean for her to hear. "You decide to live like they never existed." I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I drove to the cafe the next day with the same knots sitting low in my stomach. The air felt heavy again, though the sky was clearer than it had been in days. Maybe it wasn't the weather. Maybe it was just me, carrying the weight of everything I'd seen in that house and everything I couldn't unsee anymore. I kept replaying the image of that discarded drawing, those erased captions, the unopened gift still wrapped like a lie waiting to be discovered. I didn't plan to confront the Laura this soon. But distance only made the anger settle deeper, and I knew if I didn't speak now, the words would rot inside me. I parked the car and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, feeling the tremor I pretended wasn't there. When I finally stepped inside, the cool air hit my skin, carrying the scent of roasted coffee and something sweet from behind the counter. The cafe was bright, almost too bright for the kind of conversation I was about to have. I found a small table near the window and waited. It didn't take long. Valora walked in with that breezy confidence she always had, the kind that came naturally to people who'd never had to question their place in the family. Her linen pants were perfectly pressed, her hair loosely curled like she'd just stepped out of a photo shoot. She spotted me and smiled wide. "There you are," she said, leaning down to pull me into a hug before I could stop her. "I'm glad you reached out. It's been too long." Too long. As if I'd been on vacation instead of watching my life disintegrate from the sidelines. I nodded, but my hands stayed on the table, fingers interlaced to stop them from shaking. "Yeah," I replied. "It's been a while." Looking back now, I should have seen the gulf between us sooner. She ordered a latte and sat down, crossing one leg over the other with the practiced ease of someone who had never worried about a medical bill or begged for a chance to live. Her eyes scanned my face, searching for cracks she could smooth over with charm. "So," she said lightly, "what did you want to talk about?" I didn't touch the coffee in front of me. I hadn't taken a sip. I wasn't here for comfort. I reached into my bag and pulled out the printed page, the Yacht transfer. The ink had faded slightly from how many times I'd held it, but the number still looked obscene. I placed it on the table, sliding it toward her. "Did you ever wonder where the money came from?" Her expression shifted. Just a flicker. Barely a heartbeat. But I saw it. "I thought it was a gift," she said. "I didn't ask. They said it was something they'd planned for a while." "Planned," I repeated. "Planned while I was lying in a hospital bed, trying to breathe." The words hung between us. Heavy. Accusing. Honest. She tried to hold my gaze, but it faltered. She reached for her latte and took a slow sip, the cup trembling just slightly against the saucer. "Marlette, I didn't know." That was always the refrain. Ignorance masquerading as innocence. I reached into my bag again and pulled out the second page. The will. The trust. Two versions, one where my name belonged and one where it had been replaced. I laid them next to the first document. Her breath caught. "I didn't know about that," she whispered. That's Mom and Dad's choice." "No," I said quietly. "This is about your silence. All those years you watched me disappear from birthdays, from photos, from conversations. You never asked why." Her jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic." "It's not dramatic to want to matter," I said. "It's not dramatic to wonder why my life wasn't worth even a fraction of what you got." The cafe noise faded behind us. Conversations dulled, cups clinked, but none of it registered. My world had narrowed to the space between us, the distance shaped by every bruise she pretended not to see. "You posted birthday photos from the yacht," I continued. "Do you know what I posted that day?" She blinked. "What?" "A GoFundMe link. For anti-nausea medication. For my child. While you were uncorking champagne on a boat, I paid for with my own survival." Her face paled. She looked down at the documents, then back at me. "Marlette, I don't know what you want from me." "Not guilt," I said. "Just honesty. And apparently, that's also too expensive." Her eyes flinched, the way someone reacts when hit with a truth they've tried too hard to avoid. I pushed my chair back slowly and stood. My legs felt steady in a way they hadn't in years. I gathered my bag, but left the papers on the table. As I stepped away, I turned back just once, Not for her comfort, but for clarity. You cashed in the family name, I said, but the debt's still mine. The receipt fluttered slightly from the air conditioner. Valora reached out and flipped it over, hiding the truth again like she always did. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. The drive to my parents' house felt strangely quiet, even with the hum of the engine and the faint rattle of something in the back seat. Maybe it was the calm after seeing Valora fold the truth back into silence. Maybe it was the way the world sometimes holds its breath when something irreversible is about to happen. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't need noise. I needed the quiet to sharpen what was left of my resolve. By the time I pulled into their driveway, the sun was dipping low, spilling gold across the brick walkway. Their house looked exactly the same: trim hedges, polished porch, wind chimes tapping politely against each other. Like a postcard of a family that didn't exist anymore. At least not the way it pretended to. I walked toward the front door with my shoulders squared. I wasn't here for reconciliation. I wasn't here to be soothed. I was here because they asked for a family dinner, and I had finally learned what my place in this family really meant. I knocked once before letting myself in. "We're in the dining room, sweetheart," my mother called, cheerful in a way that made my skin tighten. I stepped into the room, and the performance began. "So glad you could make it," my mother said as she kissed my cheek lightly. My father nodded with a stiff smile. "You look healthy. That's great to see." Healthy. As if that word could patch every year they left me holding myself together in hospital rooms. I nodded, but didn't return the smile. My eyes scanned the table, 12 seats, polished silver, name cards. A roast steaming in the center, like we were preparing for company, not confrontation. Looking back now, I should have seen the script laid out long before I arrived. I took my seat. Conversation floated around me about grocery sales, church events, and Valora's latest charity photo shoot. Nobody asked how I'd been. Not really. They asked the kind of questions that don't need answers. As the first course was served, my mother dabbed her napkin and said, "So, Valora tells me you've been feeling left out." Left out. Like I'd missed a birthday card or a picnic. "We never meant for that," she added. "You know that, right?" The words hit me like cold water. I swallowed slowly, set down my fork, and reached into my purse. The air shifted. My father paused mid-sip. I slid the paper across the table. The email. Subject: Final request. Urgent surgery fund. Status: read. "I was dying," I said quietly. "And you marked this as spam." Forks froze. Nobody breathed. My father cleared his throat. Always the diplomat. "That was a long time ago, Marlette. We had a lot on our plate then." "You had lobster on your plate," I said, my voice tightening. "I had chemo." My mother's eyes widened. "Now listen. You bought a boat," I continued, while I begged for a second chance at living. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The truth was loud enough on its own. I reached into my purse again. One more piece of evidence. I unfolded it slowly. Sophia's drawing. Crayon colors smudged, edges torn from the trash bag I found it in. I laid it gently on the tablecloth. "She made this for you," I said. "You threw it away." My mother's face went pale. She reached out as if to stop me. "You can't just drop this here. In front of everyone." "Why not?" I cut in. "You threw everything else of mine out behind closed doors." The room held its breath. Even the roast seemed to stop steaming. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. My father leaned back, jaw tight, eyes narrow. "You're blowing this out of proportion. We did what we thought was right." I looked at him, really looked at him, seeing not a father but a man who made decisions based on comfort, not conscience. You saved every receipt for Valora's yacht, I said. But not one voicemail from Sophia. My mother whispered, Please, Marlette. No, I said, standing. I have nothing more to say to any of you. I didn't feel rage. I felt something sharper. Something clean. Like a thread snapping. My voice stayed low, steady. Get away from me. All of you. Chairs shifted. Someone whispered my name. But I didn't turn. I walked through the hallway, past the photos where I didn't exist, past the memories that had been rewritten, past the door that had closed on me long before I ever walked through it tonight. The door shut behind me with a soft, heavy click, more final than any slammed door. I walked into the night air, the cool breeze brushing against my face like it wasn't sure whether to comfort me or carry me forward. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. The night air still clung to my skin the next day, long after I had left my parents' house behind. I told myself I wouldn't say it again. I wouldn't waste breath on people who had already decided my life was negotiable. But the truth has a way of vibrating under the surface, pulling you toward unfinished wounds. By mid-afternoon, I found myself driving toward Valora's neighborhood, my hands resting firm on the wheel and a small USB drive pressed in my palm like a pulse. I didn't knock right away. I stood on her porch for a moment, listening to the quiet hum inside. The house was spotless when she opened the door. Clean lines, soft lighting, a space designed for photographs rather than living. Zaire answered first, her small face brightening when she saw me. Aunt Marlette, she said softly. Mom's inside. She's kind of upset, though. Upset. Of course she was. The truth always rattles the people who built their lives on polished lies. When Valora appeared behind her daughter, she looked different from yesterday. Her hair a little messy, her eyes tired, a half-finished glass of wine in her hand. She glanced at me like I'd ruined her favorite dress. You've made your point, she said, stepping aside to let me in. You humiliated them. I walked past her, the USB drive warm against my fingers. Truth doesn't humiliate, I said. Guilt does. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. She led me into the living room. The furniture looked untouched, like it had been staged rather than lived in. Zaire curled up on the sofa, holding a blanket to her chest. Her presence softened the room in a way her mother never could. So, what now? Valora asked sharply. Are you here to keep punishing us? Because that dinner. I'm not here to talk about the dinner, I said quietly. I held up the USB. There's something you haven't seen. Her expression faltered. What is that? A video, I said. Sophia recorded it a week before she died. She wanted to send it to Dad for his birthday. The words hit the room like a tremor. Valora blinked rapidly, shaking her head before she even understood. No one told me about a video, she said. Of course they didn't, I replied. You were busy choosing boat colors. I crossed to the television, plugged the USB in, and waited. The screen flashed to life. Sophia appeared, bald, pale, smiling the way only a child fighting too hard can. Her voice was soft but steady. Happy birthday, Grandpa, she said. I hope you're proud of Mommy. I drew you something. She held up a crayon drawing, edges uneven, colors too bright for what she was living through. She smiled again, small, brave. Maybe next time you'll come visit me? The video ended. Silence flooded the room. Zaire stared at the screen, her jaw slack. Valora sank onto the arm of a chair, wine glass trembling in her hand. For a moment, nobody breathed. Looking back now, I should have noticed the exact second something broke in her. Zaire was the first to speak, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom, did you save Aunt Marlette when she was sick? Valora's head snapped toward her daughter.
What? What are you talking about?
You always say we help families, Zaire said. Did you help her? Valora blinked hard. She looked at me, then back at her daughter. Sweetheart, it's not that simple. It was, I said, stepping forward. A yes or a no is simple. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Truth settled into the air like dust, visible, undeniable. I knelt beside Zaire. You're kind, I told her. Kinder than most adults in this family. Her little fingers curled into the blanket. She nodded, but didn't look away from the blank TV screen. It reflected her small face, the quiet ache of understanding something too early. Valora let out a shaky breath. I didn't know she made that video, she whispered. No one told me. Of course they didn't, I repeated. They only shared what made the story look good. They only saved what made sense for them. Her face tightened. Why are you doing this, Marlette? I rose slowly, holding her gaze. I'm not doing anything. You are. I'm just pressing play. She stood abruptly, wine sloshing. This is cruel. No, I said. Cruel is letting a dying child wait for a birthday message that never came. Cruel is leaving her drawing in a trash bag. Cruel is thinking silence is kindness. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. I stepped toward the door. My hand reached for the knob when I heard it. Aunt Marlette. Zaire's voice, thin, trembling. I turned around. She looked at me with eyes too honest for her age. I would have come to see Sophia, she whispered. I wish I had. My chest tightened, not with anger this time, but something softer, something I hadn't felt in years. Redemption doesn't always come from adults. Sometimes it comes from the one heart that hasn't learned how to lie yet. I didn't know what was waiting for me next. I drove home with a quiet confession from Zaire still circling in my mind. It stayed with me longer than any apology an adult could have offered. Her words didn't excuse anything, but they cracked something open, something small, something human. And that tiny fracture reminded me there were still people in this family capable of truth, even if they were only 8 years old. When I stepped into my apartment, the stillness wrapped around me. Not comforting, more like an empty room waiting for a decision. I locked the door behind me and stood there for a moment, letting the silence settle. Then I walked to my desk. The folder was still there from the night before, filled with papers I'd collected like bruises. I sat down slowly, the chair creaking under me, and spread everything out. Each page felt heavier than its weight. The trust documents. The unopened gift. Sophia's discarded drawing. The screenshot from the bank. The audio file where my father prayed for me instead of helping me. The birthday video my daughter made for a grandfather who never bothered to reply. I picked up one paper at a time, laying them out across the desk like evidence in a case no one else wanted to prosecute. The storm outside growled softly, as if the sky recognized what I was preparing to do. The air smelled like rain, thick and electric. Looking back now, I should have realized I wasn't planning an attack. I was preparing a record. I opened my laptop and pulled up a blank email. The cursor blinked, patient, waiting. I typed a subject line. Read this. Then decide. My fingers hovered before I began attaching the files, each one a truth my family had tried to bury. I didn't rush. I handled everything carefully, as if I were arranging stones on a grave. PDF, trust rewrite. PDF, yacht payment documentation. Audio, they said no to MP3. Video, Sophia birthdate, MOV. Image, unopened gift, JPG. Image, trash drawing, JPG. Every piece of it was real. Every piece of it was something they had chosen not to remember. None of this is hearsay, I typed. You can read it, or you can stay blind. When I clicked on the recipients list, I didn't stop at my parents or Valora. I selected every contact they had ever used to build their perfect little image. Church friends, cousins, old family neighbors,
Colleagues.
their charity board, anyone who had ever told me what a lovely couple they were. If they wanted a spotless reputation, they should have lived a spotless truth. I sat back and exhaled. My heartbeat was steady, surprisingly steady, like my body already knew this was overdue. Then I hit send. The storm cracked outside, a sound so sharp it rattled the window pane. But inside, everything felt still. Within minutes, my phone buzzed. Then again. Then again. Read receipt. Opened. Read receipt. Opened. Read receipt. Forwarded. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in years replied first. I always wondered where you went. I'm so sorry. Another message flashed from a church elder. This needs to be addressed immediately. My father tried to call. The screen lit up with his name. I let it ring. Then he called again.
And again.
I muted the phone and set it upside down. Looking back now, I should have let the storm swallow the noise sooner. A text arrived from Valora. Why would you humiliate us like this? I typed a response but didn't send it. I didn't. I just turned the lights on. I closed the phone and pushed it aside. For a moment, there was a strange stillness in my apartment, like the eye of a storm, calm in its own unsettling way. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain had started, tapping against the glass in uneven beats. The sound almost pulled me backward to that hospital hallway again. My daughter asleep beside me, my parents sitting stiffly across from the doctor. The words still replayed in my mind the same way they had the day I heard them. There's a 30% chance the treatment could work, the doctor had said. His voice gentle, hopeful. And then my father, tapping his fingers together like he was analyzing a spreadsheet. So 70% chance we throw away our retirement, he'd replied. She's not a smart investment. I remembered wanting to scream. Not because of the words, but because he had said them like he was choosing stocks, not choosing whether his daughter lived or died. The memory dissolved as thunder rolled outside. I opened the window a crack. The cool air washed over me, carrying the smell of wet asphalt and pine. I went back to the desk, sat down, and looked at the empty inbox. A new email slid into view. From my mother. Subject: Please stop. Let it go. You're tearing us apart. The irony almost made me laugh. They had torn me apart long before I ever hit send. I highlighted her message. Pressed delete. Watched it vanish, without ceremony. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. They broke me apart years ago. I just made the cracks visible. The week that followed moved strangely, as if time had loosened its grip on me. Each morning I woke with the same quiet inside my chest, but it wasn't the hollow quiet I'd carried for years. This one felt different, measured, steady, like something finally settling into place. No messages from my parents. No calls from Valora. No surprise visits. Just silence. And for once, the silence didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like release. I walked toward the harbor that morning, the air cool enough to sting a little. The kind of morning Charleston only offers before the sun climbs too high. The park was nearly empty, just a few joggers, someone walking a dog, a couple sipping coffee on a bench far from mine. I held a folded piece of paper in my hand, the crayon colors still faint under the creases. Sophia's handwriting brushed against my thumb as I walked, the way her small hand used to hold mine. I didn't realize it then, but that moment changed everything. When I reached the stone bench facing the water, I paused. The plaque glinted softly in the early light. I'd chosen the words carefully. Not poetic, not dramatic, just true. In loving memory of Sophia, loved loudly by one. I sat down slowly, letting the weight of the morning sink into me. The wind carried the smell of salt and something sweet from a nearby vendor opening early. I unfolded the drawing and smoothed the paper across my knee. The colors were faded, but her heart was still bright, uneven, imperfect, stubbornly hopeful. I placed it beneath the bronze plaque, tucking the edge so the breeze wouldn't take it. Not to bury it, to anchor it. That's where it all started, I murmured. I didn't hear footsteps at first. They were soft, careful, as if the person approaching wasn't sure they should. When I looked up, Betrayal stood a few feet away, a cup of coffee in each hand. Didn't want to interrupt, he said, offering me one. I just thought you shouldn't be here alone today. I took the cup, grateful for its warmth. Thank you, I said softly. He sat beside me, leaving enough space that it didn't feel forced. The silence between us felt warm, not heavy, like he understood without needing to say anything. He cleared his throat after a moment. There's been talk, he said, at the church. I exhaled slowly. There would be. They're holding a vote, he continued. Your mom stepped down from the charity board. I nodded. Not in victory, just acknowledgement. It wasn't about punishment, I said. It was about proof. He studied the harbor. Sometimes that's all people need, a reason to look again. Looking back now, I should have seen the shift happening around me. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. A new message notification lit up the screen. I didn't recognize the number at first. Then I did.
Zaire.
Aunt Marlette, I made a picture of Sophia. Want to see it? Attached was a photo, a child's drawing of two girls holding hands under a wide yellow sun. One tall, one small. Both smiling, both present. My throat tightened, but not with pain, with something gentler, something I hadn't let myself feel in years. She got remembered after all, I said. The breeze lifted the edge of Sophia's old drawing. It fluttered slightly, trembling like it wanted to lift away, but it didn't. The corner stayed in place, held by the bronze plaque and the weight of everything finally spoken. I stood, letting the wind brush against my face. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel erased. I felt seen, if only by the memory of my daughter and a child honest enough to speak. I whispered to myself, letting the words settle into the morning air. I didn't bury her. I carried her. And now I can finally rest. I walked away from the bench, the path stretching out ahead of me, open and unafraid. Behind me, Sophia's drawing stayed exactly where I left it, pressed gently under the bronze. Silence doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's the loudest kind of betrayal. This wasn't a story about revenge. It was about remembering what was erased, and daring to say it out loud. What about you? Have you ever been cut from your own family's photo, but made to smile anyway? If this story moved something in you, subscribe for more true-to-life family reckonings, because not every wound needs to be loud to be real. And the next story might just be yours.